we have been dividing the history that's described in the Bible into four main sections. And the first section was pre-flood, before the flood, from creation to the flood. Then the section which is called the patriarchal. Is it right? That's before the creation of the state of Israel, right? Before the children of Israel were led out of Egypt. Then the period of monarchy, and then it ended with the Babylonian captivity. And technically speaking, there is what's called an intertestament period. It's after the Jews returned from Babylonian captivity and were again allowed to live in Jerusalem, in Judea. But that period is not covered. There are no books between Malachi and Matthew. So there is no biblical literature that would cover that period. So we skip that one. And the last portion of time that's described in the Bible is, of course, the New Testament era. And from that time, only first century is described in the Bible, in the so-called New Testament. And so it is from this portion that we are taking or choosing one individual to look at his life and learn. And it is, of course, the person who wrote the most books of the Bible. Paul. Yeah, Apostle Paul. Do you remember? Do you know how many books did he write?
We don't.
Huh?
We don't.
I guess 5.
Maybe 20?
I guess 3, 5.
No, I guess 12.
12.
20?
Really is too much.
What is like 30% of the
Well, there are 27 books in the New Testament, which is, of course, not the correct term, by the way. New Testament is not a set of books. New Testament is something else. We won't go there, but there are 27 so-called apostolic writings. 27 books written, in the first century AD, and Apostle Paul wrote 14 of those. 14. If we count epistle or letter to Jews, or it's called Hebrews in most of the Bible, then and it has been believed for centuries that Paul was the one who wrote epistle to Hebrews as well as other 13, and I also believe that based on internal evidences. But he is the most fruitful writer in terms of how many books. Of course, they are not all as voluminous as, say, the book of Isaiah, the prophet, and so forth. But still, the number of books, counting individually, is 14. So he is the most prolific writer in all the biblical history. So we will, attempt to take a look at his life, and to, of course, not all of his life, but we are primarily concentrating on the years that are kind of corresponding to the years that we are currently in, or you are currently in. I don't know. So about the age that we are all here. So let's start. We will be reading a lot today. It's a biographical material, and we will gather little bits and pieces from different parts of the biblical narrative to paint the picture, and then try to learn from it. Okay? We will be doing circles, and I guess there will be many circles today. So please have your Bible, your scroll ready, and we will be moving fast. That's what my desire is, but it will depend on how fast you're able to click. Okay, Acts 21:39. Most of the text will be from the book of Acts, so it will say it right. Acts 21:39 tells us about the place where Paul, or rather Saul at that time, was born.
Павел же сказал: я иудеянин, тарсянин, гражданин небезызвестного киликийского города. Прошу тебя, позволь мне говорить к народу.
Thank you. How does this word, which describes the place where he was born, how does it sound in English? Tarshish?
Тарсус.
Tarsus? Okay.
Тарсус.
Tarsus? Okay. Well, it's in Hebrew it's Tarshish. It's a very well-known city, and the text itself says that. How does it, in English?
My version says important city.
Important city. It's good to be born in an important city, right? Rather than somewhere, on the outskirts, as some of us, were. So, when we look at the history, the biblical encyclopedia says that Tarsus was like Alexandria, if you know what I mean. And Alexandria was a very prominent city in terms of education. There was a well-known library of Alexandria, which was, by the way, burned, destroyed by fire in history. But it was a very notable and important educational center. So people of science, people of literature, people of learning, they would be settling there, wanting to get education. So Tarsus was the place where Saul was born, and it gave him an opportunity to value education, value knowledge, value science. And as we will see later, this interest towards learning, towards science, was manifested later in his life, pretty soon. Next.
When the commanding officer had given him...
No, sorry. Next passage, Acts 22, verses 25 through 29. Chapter 22, verses 25 through 29.
Мне все прочитать этот один?
Let's do it one by one, so that everybody has.
When they had stretched him out for the lash, Paul said to the centurion standing nearby, "Is it legal for you to lash a man who is a Roman citizen without proper trial?"
When the centurion had heard this, he went to the commander and told him, saying, What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman."
The commanding officer came and asked him, "Tell me, are you a Roman?" He said, "Yes."
Начальник отвечал: "Я за большие деньги приобрел это гражданство." Павел же сказал: "А я и родился в нем."
Then immediately those who were about to examine him withdrew from him, and the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him.
Thank you. Another fact, he was a Roman citizen, and it was a big deal at that time. As you see, to become a citizen, you had to pay a huge amount of money, right? Not like in the United States. I recently paid about 700.
How about taxes?
No, just to become, and then you pay taxes. Roman taxes were pretty heavy at that time of history. So you see that his family was pretty well off, right? Because he was a Jew, and he needed to somehow purchase this citizenship. And it wasn't him, it was his parents who did that. So, they should have had a comfortable life,
Yeah.
right? So they used the options available, and they had the highest status available in that society in terms of being a citizen fully protected by all the rights that come with this status. And as you see here, it helped him to avoid being. It says, I believe when Seva read it, it says question him, right? But other versions, like Russian, has torture him, to apply torture while questioning, to add motivation to the process. So he was able to escape that. Okay, now it's interesting to note that you do remember that he has two names. This person has two names. Saul, Savl in Russian, is identical to the name of the first king of Israel, whose name is Saul in Russian version. So it sounds like two different names, but in actuality it's the same name. Shaul in the original. Shaul. Saul. And his second name was Paul, right? Paul. And sometimes it is believed that when he became a Christian, he switched from his Jewish name, Shaul, to his Christian name, Paulos, and I mean in Greek. But it's not true. Can somebody read Acts chapter 13, verse 9, and then whoever is next, please prepare to read Acts chapter 15, verse 37. So 13:9 and 15:37.
But Saul, who was also known as,
Sorry, turn.
well, he said anybody, the first one.
No, I think it's okay.
Тенчик.
But then-
Acts
13:9.
Я открыл 15:37.
А Сергей, ты тоже открыл 15, да?
Я открыл 13.
Guys, so you have that internal communication invisible that you. Okay, go ahead.
But Saul, also known as Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, stared straight at him.
So Saul, also known as Paul. Okay. Then.
Дальше, 15.
Uh-huh.
Варнава хотел взять с собой Иоанна, называемого Марком.
Okay. So this verse, chapter 15, verse 13, shows another case of two names being used. And Ioan, it's Yohanan, it's a Hebrew name, and then Marcus is of course a Roman name. So we see that, and this is not the only instance, right? Like Kepha and Peter, two names in two different languages for the same person. It was customary for Jews at that time to have their own name, the one that was given at the time of circumcision, for the boys. And then because they lived in the Roman Empire, they also had their Roman or Greek name. So it's not to replace, but to coexist, because the Bible clearly says that Saul and Paul, it's all. So it doesn't hold up to the test when the theory is presented that somehow he relinquished his Jewish name for the sake of supposedly Christian name.
So,
because Paulos is not a Christian name by any means.
so because he was the missionary to the Gentiles, so that's why he used more Paul name.
Exactly, because the first time that this new name is given to us in the narrative of the Acts of the Apostles is in chapter 13, where he is commissioned for his first missionary journey. And so when he goes to the out of Judea territory, when he works for the Gentiles, he does use his Paul name. Yeah. Okay, he was born in Tarsus. He was a Roman citizen. Then his education. Acts chapter 26, verse 4. 26, verse 4, and whoever is reading next, it will be chapter 23. Okay?
Жизнь мою от юности моей, которую сначала проводил я среди народа моего в Иерусалиме, знают все иудеи.
Thank you. So, he was born in Tarsus, but then he says that his life since the beginning, basically, since his childhood, does anybody have childhood in their versions? Youth. Okay, it's good. He was in Jerusalem. What was so we see that the family moved to Jerusalem, right? And the next passage will tell us a little bit more about that. It's chapter 23, verses 12 through 16. 12 through 16. Okay.
When it was the day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath, neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul.
More than 40 men were involved in this plot.
Они, придя к первосвященникам и старейшинам, сказали: мы клятвою заклялись не есть ничего, пока не убьем Павла.
So now you and the council request the commanding officer to bring him down to you, as if you were going to determine his case by conducting more through inquiry. We are ready to kill him before he comes near this place.
But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul.
Thank you. So what fact is surfacing here?
His relatives.
Yeah. Paul's relatives, his nephew, and subsequently, Paul's sister's family lived in Jerusalem, first of all, and second of all, they had access to the highest levels of Jewish society, namely high priest, then elders, and also members of the Sanhedrin, which is the supreme court of the Jewish people. So he was part of a very powerful family, right? When they moved to Jerusalem, they became very prominent in Jewish society there. And the reason that they moved there, at least one of the reasons, is given in Acts chapter 22, verse 3. 22, verse 3.
Okay. Then Paul said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, and I was brought up and educated here in Jerusalem under Gamaliel. As a student, I was carefully trained in our Jewish laws and customs.
Thank you. So this is one of the reasons that the family moved to Jerusalem, to give the boy education, the best possible education. Because this person, Gamliel is his name in Hebrew, Gamliel, he is well known in Jewish writings, in Jewish material, in Talmud, in Mishnah, he is mentioned a number of times. So he had yeshiva, school for the boys, and Paul was studying there. So now we could see the connection between him being born in Tarsus, where education was prominent, and there is a saying in Russian: "С кем поведешься, того и наберешься." So that your circle, your friends, and your society influences you. So if you live in the neighborhood where education is valued, you kind of automatically aspire to be like that as well. So the family moved to Jerusalem so that Paul could get his education at the best place possible at that time. Okay. What kind of student was he? Galatians 1:14. Galatians 1:14. And then we'll be reading from the book of Acts, chapter 26. So if you could open it before that.
I advanced in the Jewish religion beyond many of my own age among my countrymen, being more exceedingly zealous for the traditions of my fathers.
Thank you. So what kind of student was he?
Best student.
Yeah. He was, if you use the terminology common today, it was a summa magna cum laude holder. Do you know what it means?
He was not educated.
Well, in the academic world, there are these honors that student gets when he or she completes the education, and cum laude is when your GPA is 3.5.
Oh, my 3.79.
And then you have magna cum laude, it's when it's 3.75. And then summa magna cum laude is when you have 4.0.
Sorry, sir.
So he was a 4.0 student. Okay, now Acts chapter 26, verses 24 and 25.
As Paul was saying those things in his defense, Festus exclaimed loudly, "You have lost your mind, Paul. Your great learning is driving you insane."
But Paul replied, "I have not lost my mind, most excellent Festus, but am speaking true and rational words."
Okay, so who is Festus?
It's one of the rulers of Rome.
Yeah, one of the rulers of Rome. And Festus testifies to the fact that Paul has. Yeah, the Russian version has that your great education has led you to being a little off, and it is also a well spread notion that there is a term in Russian zaumny. So so there is and is what? Mind, and generally intellectual capacity. But then there is zaumny, which goes beyond that. So he was educated over the top. And so people knew that, and they testified to that. And so he was well known for him being, very, very proficient in education. Yeah. Okay, we have talked about the place where he was born, his education, where he lived, and his place and his family's place in Jewish society in Jerusalem, the way that he was educated. And now let's take a look at his personal achievements in terms of his place in the society of the time. And we will be reading from chapter 26, now verses 4 and 5. 4 and 5.
So then all Jews know my manner of life from my youth up, which from the beginning was spent among my own nation and at Jerusalem.
Having known me from the first, if they are willing to testify that after this strictest sect of our religion I lived a Pharisee.
Thank you. He was a Pharisee. That's another important piece of his personality definition. He was a Pharisee. What does it mean? Of course, in Christian world, and generally speaking, the term Pharisee is very negative, right? Hypocrites and so forth. But basic dimension of the term is quite different. Let's read now from the Epistle to Philippians chapter 3, verses 4 through 6. Philippians chapter 3, verses 4 through 6.
though I myself might have confidence even in the flesh, if any other man thinks that he has confidence in the flesh, I yet more.
Обрезанный 8-й день из рода Израилева, колена Вениаминова, еврей от евреев, по учению фарисеев.
Verse 6, chapter 3, verse 6.
Okay, good. Then Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have." But what?
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Philippians.
Right.
Philippians.
Son of
No, those scrolls are giving us hard time today.
Concerning zeal, persecuting the church toward the righteousness which is in the law, blameless.
Mm-hmm. So what does the term Pharisee mean? He was blameless in the sight of the Lord. Pharisees, the term Pharisee is debated in terms of what's the origin of this term, because it sounds similar to two different terms. First of all, there is a term that means separated. Pharisee means separated, meaning that people are separated. This group is separated from the rest of the people because of their strict observance of the law, because of their high standards in terms of keeping the law. So they were way above average in terms of their aspirations to be holy and sanctified. Another explanation in terms of derivation of this verb and this word is from the verb that means to teach. So Pharisees are those who were teaching the law. But these two explanations of the origin of the term, they actually don't contradict, because they had both. They were very educated in terms of the knowledge of the law, and they had very high standards. And Paul writes about himself, "I was blameless in the sight of God." Can you imagine what it would mean like? What it would mean, what it would be like? That the law, had nothing against Paul.
Is it just the law that Torah, or the law that man-made laws that the Pharisees
Both.
had? So it was both.
Yeah, because we read in Galatians 1:14 that when he was a student, he was exceeding in the traditions of the fathers as well. So he kept both, and it was much harder than to us. It's only 613 commandments, but they had hundreds more commandments, based on those six. And at that time, temple was still standing, so you had to do all the 2/3 of the law of the Torah that deals with all the ceremonies and so forth. So it was hard. Okay, so could you picture this person?
It's like prophet.
Excellent student, right? Has his pedigree, his lineage is, and the reason that he mentions that he is from the tribe of Benjamin is because the tribe of Benjamin never apostated from God. I mean, the 10 northern tribes, they went to Assyrian captivity and they basically assimilated with the Gentiles. But the kingdom of Judah, which had 3 main tribes, Levites, the tribe of Judah, and the tribe of Benjamin, they kept Torah, they kept the whole scriptures, and though they were led to Babylon captivity, they did return and rebuild and so forth. So his lineage also was quite impressive. Did he ever lie?
I don't think so.
Probably would be breaking the law then.
Yeah. Of course, we are not talking about the totality of his actions, but he's describing the point when he got converted. So he says, because we will be reading this passage further a little bit later. At the time when he was converted, he was blameless in terms of the Lord. So it's a pretty high standard. So, one of the commentators of Messianic branch of Christianity, his name is Joseph Shulam. He's a Jew from Bulgaria, and of course he was not a believer. And he says, I would not be able to say this because if you take pig, for example, I ate everything from nostrils to the tail. That's his expression. From от пятачка до хвоста. So Paul never touched anything unclean. He was perfect.
And he's not ashamed of his of being Pharisee. It's like we all think right now, oh, Jesus was against Pharisees, and then right now he's like boasting about it. I'm from Pharisees and then Benjamin.
Yeah, of course, he puts this into the context. He says that if anyone would want to boast by his achievements or her achievements, I would be the one. So, but to go along with your point, I would just remind that when Apostle Paul was being judged in the Supreme Court, in the Sanhedrin, he said, I am a Pharisee and a son of Pharisee. He doesn't say I was a Pharisee. So his statement shows that he still considered himself belonging to that group. And it also says that his father was a Pharisee. So he was brought up in a very strict religious family that observed everything that was written in the law and also, added by rabbis. Okay, so he achieved a very high level, not only in terms of education, but also in terms of sanctity, in terms of being obedient to God's law. Right? Okay. And supposedly and obviously, because of all of this, because of the way he was brought up, he lived, he became very successful in finding his place in the society. Let's look at his status based on the material available in the book of Acts. Acts chapter 7, verse 58. 7:58. Who is reading? Dennis?
Me?
Yeah.
Они выволокли Стефана за город и стали побивать его камнями. Свидетели расправы служили своей верхней одеждой ног юноши по имени Савл.
What can this possibly mean? Why would the biblical narrative give this seemingly unimportant detail that the witnesses placed their garments at the feet of Saul, who is called a young man. What would be the significance of that? Let's enlarge the context. The witnesses of what?
Stoning
of capital punishment. So the witnesses of capital punishment, by witnesses, Torah means those who were actually doing the capital punishment. Because according to Torah, if a person is convicted or sentenced to death by stoning, then the witnesses are the ones who are doing the execution. So those people who were executing Stephen, first martyr of Christianity, they laid their garments by the feet of this young man. Why? Why do you have to take first of all, why would you have to take off your clothes?
So it's easier to throw
Comfortable.
rocks.
They had the upper clothes too.
Well, himation, the term is in Greek, just says clothes. It's not specified. It's not specified. It's a general term. So the Greek doesn't help us here. Only when we learn, what it meant in Jewish setting that we could understand. And Talmud is, you don't know what Talmud is, right? It's a collection of Jewish laws, basically. It describes the way that Sanhedrin, the upper court, operated. And there was a system of signals. When a person who was convicted to stoning was being brought to the place of execution, they had a system of communication that allowed them to stop the execution if another evidence that might become evidence for innocence of the person was found. So they wanted to make sure that person is not killed based on incomplete evidences. So they had a system where there was a special piece of cloth, and the term that's equivalent to this term, the Greek term himation, cloth, that's equivalent in the Hebrew in Hebrew language is this special cloth that was used to give signals to those, like one person is standing at the gates or at the door of Sanhedrin, then another one who sees this stands, like on the corner, then another one at another corner. So there was a system of signals that would stop the execution if something was found that would save the person's life. And this is significant because Saul was in charge of this system. The garments that are mentioned here, when we put it in the historical context, it's not about outer garments or linen garments or whatever. It's about the special material that was used as a signaling system, and Paul had, when everything went through the process, he was the one responsible for keeping that system, those pieces of cloth. So it shows his proximity to the High Court, to the Supreme Court. It shows his involvement in the system. He was a very important figure. And it's not all. Let's read the next verse, which would be Acts chapter 8, verse 1. Chapter 8, verse 1, and then the next one will be 26:10. Just for you to get ready. So Acts 8:1.
Me? And Saul agreed completely with killing him. Saul begins to persecute the church. Now on that day a great persecution began against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were forced to scatter throughout the regions of Judah and Samaria.
What does this phrase, Saul was, how did you read that?
Agreed completely with killing.
I have Saul was consenting to his death.
Hearty agreement.
What?
Hearty agreement.
What would be the significance of this phrase? Who would care about, the opinion of a young man?
Was the one who did the final decision?
We could say that, but at least for sure we know that he was a part of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit more is given in chapter 26:10.
Это я и делал в Иерусалиме, получив власть от первосвященников, я многих святых заключал в темнице, И когда убивали их, я подавал на то голос.
Thank you. Could you look up this last phrase in different versions? When they were killed, I did what?
I cast my vote.
I cast my vote.
Yeah.
Okay. So he was a voting member of the upper court, and it is a big deal. It's you know, Sanhedrin is the supreme court of the land for Jewish people, and authority was given to this body to write or to pronounce the death sentences, right? And he became a member of Sanhedrin at a very young age, because you know when that stoning was happening, and it says that Saul gave his voice towards that decision. He is called a young man. So you could become, technically speaking, you could become a member of Sanhedrin when you are 30. That's based on the literature of the time. And it would be very rare to hold this kind of position, this kind of office at that young age. So according to Torah, you could enter public office when you turn 30. And by the time he got to the age of 30, he was, you know, at the top. I mean, there is nothing higher than the Sanhedrin in his line of education, because he was a scholar of the law, so he had to know everything. Okay, and another one that shows his place in the society is chapter 9. Again, it's book of Acts, chapter 9, verses 1 and 2.
But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest
and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found anywhere who belonged to the way, whatever men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem.
Thank you. So how would you describe him based on these two verses? Well, in terms of his place in the society.
He was able to request letters from the high priest, probably.
I guess he got access here to high priest.
First of all, yeah, he was able to freely like walk in.
Authority.
Yes, and would you agree with the term? What would be the term? The chief persecutor of the Sanhedrin and of the Sanhedrin. Well, he was more than that.
Yeah.
He was more than that. He was in charge of the operation to track down and bring to justice, you know, all those heretics, you know, as he regarded them. So.
FBI.
Oh, you could say it was like a man.
Yeah. So here's the man, accomplished, successful. You know, he achieved everything that he was able to. And now happens his pivotal meeting with the supernatural being. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, verses 3 through 6, and then some others. 3 through 6.
Когда же он шел и приближался к Дамаску, внезапно осиял его свет с неба.
He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?
Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting, he replied.
Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do.
It's through 6, right?
Yeah.
Now verse 10 and 11.
Now there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. He said, Behold, it's me, Lord.
11.
Oh.
Then the Lord told him, Get up and go to the street called Straight, and at Judah's house look for the man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying.
Verses 15 through 20 now.
The Lord said to him, Go, because this man is my chosen instrument to carry my name before Gentiles and kings and the people of Israel.
For I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake.
Ananias departed and entered into the house. Laying his hands on him, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord who appeared to you on the road by which you came has sent me, that you may receive your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit.
Immediately something like scales fell from his eyes, and he received his sight. He arose and was baptized.
И приняв пищу и крепился, и был Савл несколько дней с учениками в Дамаске.
And 20.
Immediately he preached the Christ in the synagogues, that he is the Son of God.
Amazing story. When Paul later recalls the event, he says that he heard a voice speaking to him in Hebrew language, and it's a very interesting detail, because Hebrew language was something that Paul knew very well because of his study, right? It was a sacred language. It was a language of the priests, of the scholars, and so forth. So Jesus talked to him in Hebrew language. He met Jesus in this experience on the road to Damascus, and it says that he immediately, he prayed, right? He prayed. When the Lord talks to Ananias, he says, "Go to that house and find the man named Saul. He is praying now." He prayed a lot, and then when the miracle happened, he was able to say again. He immediately baptized and immediately began to preach Jesus as the Messiah. So it shows and tells us a lot about him. There are people who have been coming to our church for 10 years now. And they are attending, and they are part of mini church program. They offer their house for the mini church together, but they still have not become part of the church family. There are many people who, when God tells them something, either through reading of the Bible or through sermons or books, or directly they have a revelation of biblical truth, they say, "Okay, I'll think about it when I have free time." And time goes on. People become older, their strength weakens, and then, at a very ripe age of like 80, they say, "Yes, Lord, I give my life to you." But there is nothing to give at that time. Biblical history was made by young people. Not that old cannot do anything for the Lord, but mostly when you take the statistics, those who were moving God's cause on the earth forward, they were young. When they still had power, when they still had abilities, talents, strength to do things, They had enthusiasm. They served the Lord. So Paul was a kind of person that when he saw that something is right, when he knew that this was the truth, he immediately switched sides. He didn't care about which side he is on. And we will be reading a little bit more today, but the picture that we painted shows that he had a lot to give up, a lot to lose, right? But he didn't care about that.
He probably would be the next high priest. I mean, the chief figure of the synagogue.
Yeah. So let's read about something about a little bit about what was happening inside of him when he was making this decision. It's Galatians chapter 1 verses 15 and 16. Galatians 1 verses 15 and 16.
You guys.
Когда же Бог, избравший меня от утробы матери моей и призвавший благодатью своей, благословил.
16.
To reveal his Son in me, so that I could preach him among the Gentiles. I did not go to ask advice from any human being.
So you see, this is the way to make decisions for God. Oftentimes, most of the time, people begin consulting. Family, relatives, bosses. We are all interconnected. We have many instances in this area of people who have heard the truth, the new aspects of truth that they did not know before. They have accepted it, and then they ran it by their relatives, by their circles, and they said, yes, this is the truth, but I still want my salary, I still want my friends, I still want my family. So I'll just stay here and I'll be God-fearing man or woman, but where I am currently. So basically still living the same lifestyle, but being converted up here. Paul wasn't like that. He understood that this is a personal relationship with God. Whatever your parents or siblings or whoever things is not relevant. If you do know, if you have a revelation from God, and it is something that's not often seen, unfortunately. I personally know tens of families in this area, the Greater Seattle area, that have shared with me that they are accepting everything that they hear on the radio when they see that it's biblical, but they just don't have the courage to stand up for what they believe. And because they don't stand up, they tend to devaluate the value of truth. If you don't act upon the truth, it diminishes its grab on you and its power on you. So Paul says, I did not consult any human being because I knew that my allegiance is to God, and to Him I serve, and the decision that I make is for Him and based on my relationships with Him. Another passage, this is the last one for today, Philippians chapter 3 verses 5 through 7. Philippians chapter 3 verses 5 through 7.
Обрезанный 8-й день из рода Израилева, колена Вениаминова, еврей от евреев по учению фарисей.
5 through 7?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. 7 and 8. I'm sorry. 7 and 8.
Но что для меня было преимуществом, то ради Христа я почел считаю.
Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus is my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ.
Hallelujah. Now, if we had more people like that, who are who are putting high value on the truth, on the knowledge of Jesus Christ, and are acting upon the truth that they learn, we would have much more books written, many more books written, many more churches established. Paul established more churches than any other apostle in his life. He says that he spread the gospel from Jerusalem to, in Russian version, Illyric. And when you take a look at the map, it's a huge territory. So, and he says that I was going to the places where gospel was not preached before. So he was always breaking new ground, and he was establishing churches everywhere he went. There are 4 missionary journeys of Apostle Paul described in the book of Acts. So he established multitude of churches. So he wrote most books of the Bible. He planted most of the churches, and he was the one who was able to preach on a very high level of Roman society, not only Jewish society but Roman society as well. If you remember, when he was called on the road to Damascus, the Lord told him that he would be preaching to the kings, and this is what happened. He preached to a number of kings, and some of them to the number of Roman rulers, officials, and some of them were on the verge of becoming Christians, right? And then he spent time in Rome when he was directly exposed to the court, to the emperor's court, and he was influencing people there. So the Lord was able to use him in a very broad spheres to influence people to make decisions for God, and he is still influencing us today by what he wrote, by his epistles. So what would be main lessons from the study of his life? Please, you could go in circles, or counterclockwise, or randomly, whoever wants to. What are you taking today with you from this study? Daniel?
Be more like Paul. Spread the gospel, get an education.
Okay, thank you. Getting education, spreading. Andrew?
Don't wait till you're 80.
Amen. Amen. Guys, you have so much potential. If Apostle Paul had the gadgets that you do, and that he would be able to know how to use them the way you do, I mean, the opportunities are limitless, literally. So at your age, you could become a billionaire, in a couple of years, right? In today's society. So why not become as successful in terms of evangelism, in terms of helping people to understand who God is, so forth. Anybody else?
Just the fact that he was able to leave everything, like he had everything in this society that we could wish for.
Yeah.
Money, position, power, and he said everything is rubbish unless it leads me to God.
Looks like his cell is not enough.
I think it's I got a lesson that you have to know what you believe in and believe it strongly, and it's interesting how he didn't know Jesus, but he knew everything about Jesus. He just studied, he believed what he believed, and he knew it's true. He didn't doubt anything because he just knew everything. And then whenever he realized that he's wrong, he really switched the sides really fast because he knew everything about it.
Yeah. All
So-
the prophecies, all the predictions.
So I think I got a lesson from you to stay firm in what you believe in, and even if something is not right what you believe in, and God will open to you what's right, and then you will just switch right away
Yeah.
because you're honest with yourself, and you know what you believe it's true.
And I believe the fact that he was a very thorough student of the Bible was a major factor, because it's some people are very easily persuaded one way or another way. You meet this preacher, energetic preacher, you are all fired up, and you say, sign me up. But then another one comes and says a different thing. So if you are not grounded in the Word of God, then it's a very dangerous situation. But because he was very knowledgeable, he was able to connect the dots, as we say, right? And it was a natural step for him. Many people say that he switched from Judaism to Christianity, which is not true. He found the realization of Judaism, something that he always prayed for. Jews pray for the coming of Messiah daily, right? All the prophecies that he knew, he realized that they are fulfilled now. So it was just the next step for him. But you could not make the leap. You can only make steps. So to be able to accomplish more, don't wait for the big moment in your life. Walk slowly, do your diligence, the best you can, and God will lead you to opportunities that you could not have imagined yourself. Okay,
I wanted to add a little bit more. It's just interesting how he knew Bible a lot. He knew all the writings a lot. And at the time when he was blind, it was enough for him to link all the moments. When Jesus told him, hey, I am the real Messiah. So when he got blinded, it was enough for him of the blindness to sit there and realize and think of those moments that he linked everything to. And then as soon as his eyes were open, he got baptized, which means that he didn't have a chance to go through all the writings because he was blind. He just knew everything, so he linked it in his head.
Okay. Any more lessons for yourself? What's the definition of success based on this story?
That eventually leads you to good, right ways to the Christ.
Or maybe I should clarify what's the recipe for success. Be faithful, right? Be faithful to God. Be true to what you know is truth, is the truth. And God will replace one type of greatness with another type of greatness. I know a number of young men who became church members when they were teenagers or youth, and they had a bright future picture before them. They were set up to be very prominent people in their society, and when they so to speak switched sides, people predicted them very dim future, but they became much more successful, powerful, well-known, popular, and in all the aspects that they were aspiring to. God, when God takes something, He has prepared something better for everyone. So this Paul's experience shows that the trade-off is significant, but it's a worthwhile one.
I guess I got something to say.
Okay.
I kind of mentioned that, but I guess education. What I want to mention is like education, because you never know. Who you will talk to. King, like for example, he got like kings and like older guys. So for us to be able to like communicate it like high level guys, we're supposed to be educated enough. Yeah.
Different society groups speak different language, right? And to be able to talk to people of any level of the society takes some learning, and usually broadening your knowledge base by means of education is a good way to accomplish that purpose.
Also, Solomon says the wisdom of God is the best wisdom you can get, and Paul actually got it because he was learning from Torah. He knew all the Torah.
Well, his education included also Greek writers, Greek poets, Greek philosophers. He knew Greek, religion as well. So he was educated in both secular and biblical studies. Okay, so I hope this will serve as inspiration for you, because whatever your age is, you are still making the decision. Please never think never think of yourself as somebody who is insignificant. Well, for some it's maybe vice versa. Some people think that they're so significant that they need to be trimmed down a little bit. But God has a purpose for every one of us, and He wants to do great things through us. And you could settle for an average accomplishments, but anyone could do much more if you only believe that God has a calling for you. If you are faithful and react to the truth the way that God expects, God will do great things for you. And that's amazing. Okay,